Welcome to episode 16 of the Necronama.com. Today's episode is brought to you in part by the writings of Carl Jung. Probably influenced by Eastern philosophies and religions, Jung adopted a dualistic framework of positive psychology. In 1933, Jung stated that duality is a fact of human nature. He said, "Every good quality has its bad side, and nothing that is good can come into the world without directly producing a corresponding evil. This is a painful fact." Jung believed that we cannot achieve wholeness without integrating the dark side of ourselves. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about here today as we look at Stanley Kubrick's classic, Full Metal Jacket. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now. And if I was in the military, my nickname would be Dropout. And you know what? That's still better than Bone Spurs.
Ooh, we're going there to begin with? This is going to be an awesome podcast. And I am Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host of this podcast, and U.S. Army veteran who definitely has no respect for somebody who I guess you could refer to them as being a draft dodger who shits on veterans and steals from veterans. But I don't know what's worse, somebody like that or people who say they support the troops and then support a piece of shit like that.
Wow, we did go there today. All right.
So, hey, it's Veterans Day week, man. It's Salute to Service month. I don't give a shit.
There you go. So you already mentioned being in the military. I will tell everyone straight out, I was not. And the movie we're discussing today is actually the reason why. When I was younger and I saw it for the first time, Leonard scared the living shit out of me when he lost his mind, which we'll get to. And that's not what did it for me, though. It was what I want to jump immediately into here in a second and talk about, which was the complete loss of individuality. And nothing in the world scares me more than not being myself. And that's why I didn't join.
Oh, well, I didn't join the Marines because of this movie. And I also had to go into the Army because, one, my mother's advice, because my entire family's military, primarily Army. There's some Marines, there's some Navy, some Air Force in there, but very, very few compared to Army. But my mother's suggestion was when I had the opportunity for, the Air Force and the Marines were looking at me. She said, don't go into either one of them. Don't go to the Navy or the Marines. Maybe you can go to Air Force because in the Marines and the Navy, I don't know what the fuck their insignias are. So at least I need to know what rank I'm looking at when I talk to you. So at least go Army. If you go into the officer corps in the Air Force, it's all the same shit. But the Navy and the Marines, their stuff is weird. Like ensigns and captains aren't captains, and it's just, she was like, it doesn't make any sense. But yeah, I ended up going in, and a few of my friends who are also veterans, we all have the same perspective with it. We went in for selfish reasons. We were in economically disadvantaged situations, i.e. broke as a mug or broker than a mug, and decided this is what we need to do to pay off our college or pay back our student loans, potentially travel, just all those things that are there. And then even possibly get some of the education along the way to advance with respect to career. But yeah, when I saw this movie as a kid, as a teenager, as an adult, and even as being out of the military, I use this film when I'm talking about the period of Vietnam and the way it's captured on film. But each time I saw the movie, there was no impression that was left on me that was kind of this flag waving, uber patriotic moment that I had with the film where I was kind of like, this is an awesome thing, and I'm going to run out right now and go join the military. When I saw this movie, and as we'll talk about on the show today, I saw it as straight up horror. Straight up fucking horror. Every second of this. Like, there was no moment where I was like, oh, things are going to be completely resolved. It's going to be a great ending to this. I just saw it as complete horror. And I've talked to several Vietnam veterans, and they said that was basically, for the most part, that was their experience, was you didn't know what was going to happen day to day.
Yeah, I think that this movie definitely falls into horror in that respect, because there's no feeling at any time, like you said, that there's going to be a happy ending. And I don't know if that's because I've seen it so many times, but I feel like if I was watching it fresh for the first time, I would still feel that. Like I wouldn't feel like Joker's leaving at the end with a smile on his face and getting married and starting a family and being happy, you know? Like, I don't know. It very much feels like a horror movie does to me.
I mean, is Kubrick directing this one, just like when we talked about The Shining, and there is that dark, that darkness that hangs over this film, whereas a lot of movies prior to this, especially the ones that we're talking about Vietnam, the ones prior to this that were filmed in the 60s and 70s, were all these gung-ho John Wayne type films, and some actually had John Wayne type films that talked about patriotism and supporting the troops and how great America is, but then ignoring all the fucked up shit that was going on during the war. Which, you know, it was part of kind of the propaganda and the conditioning to get people, you know, to support the war effort until the war just lost its popularity and people didn't want to buy that shit anymore.
Well, I mean, they even talk about that in Full Metal Jacket, but we can come back to that. But yeah, there's so many war movies that I think classify as horror as well. And I'm sorry, but is there any horror on the planet that's worse than war? Like, it's a grand scale killing. So anyone who wants to say this isn't a horror movie, I beg to disagree. All right, shall we jump in?
Let's go for it.
So we open the movie with loss of individuality, one of my favorite themes. And like I said, the reason I didn't join the military. We literally open with a bunch of people we've never seen before, all getting their heads kind of violently shaved to look the same and start their roads towards not being themselves anymore. I love that we get no backstory. We don't have any idea what got anyone to this point, whether they were drafted, whether they showed up. Like, we don't know anything about their past at this point. And it's just immediate indoctrination, you know? And then we go from there into Gunnery Sergeant Hartman yelling at everybody. And I love how this movie just immediately hits, like, it's almost like memories, you know, like it's these huge points that hit you. So like, you remember getting your head shaved and joining, you remember the moment that he walked onto your unit, you know, I love that. So my first question to you is, and I know you were in a different branch of the military, but
I know we didn't eat crayons in the Army. They did in the Marines.
Was that like, did they serve them, or like were people sneaking them in their Foot Locker? But so, but no. So my question is, does this feel like an accurate representation of basic training to you?
Oh, hell yes. Because there is that whole idea of breaking you down as far as from the individual. And that's even part of the program when they're talking to you. We're here to break you down so we can build you back up. And sadly, what ends up happening is, as you see, you know, all this, the head shaving and stuff like that, you know, they give that, I can't remember, it was this movie or Jarhead, where they talked about, you know, making you into an empty vessel that they can fill you back in. And that's part of that Marine Corps logic. And the Marine Corps lore. But in the Army, it's that same thing as far as cutting your hair. So, you know, you're all uniform. You all look alike or look as similar as possible. Your individuality is taken away. And you really don't have time to tell anybody your backstory or where you're from or who you are. That's some shit that, you know, basically because of the scheduling and the training and the what you have to do on a daily basis, the times that you have to get up in the morning till the times that you have to, you know, you go to sleep at night, there's very little interaction that you get in those first few weeks. you don't get to know anybody else until, week 4 or 5, as far as, even something like your first names. And that's something that really goes there, and in this movie, you have the nicknames that from early on where drill instructor Hartman is telling them, Private Snowball, Private Joker, John Wayne, this, all these different things, or Cowboy, all the Gomer Pyle, all these names that get popped off because, one, they kind of don't want to fucking care about your name and this whole idea of, or at least getting to know you well enough to get your name, even though your name is on your uniform. It's stenciled in on your uniform. It's not about getting to know you. The importance is you're supposed to be there to learn about the institution itself and what role you fit in that institution. So, being that cog that's going to be put in the machine now, like, what is going to be your purpose? What are you going to do? And if you're a fucked up cog, you're not going to be there that long because we're not going to allow you to screw up the machine. And, a lot of analogies get used, but, with the weakest link and things like that. But there, within the military itself, whether it happens to be the Army or the Marines, because they're the most similar, whether it happens to be the Army or the Marines, there is that philosophy of you don't want somebody who can't hack it in your unit. You don't want and you definitely don't want to be that guy that becomes targeted as not being able to do some things because it gets ingrained in you. If this person is a fuck up in basic, that's not the person you want on the battlefield with you, or, even in an office with you. Because if they fuck up, you pay the price. And, early on in military training, I mean, I remember getting smoked the first day. The first encounter that we had was, everything was all nice and it seemed like it was all cute and whatever. But like I said, I grew up in a military family, so I knew what was to be expected. But there are all these kids, because I went in after I graduated college, but there are all these kids who are 17, 18 years old who were there, who had no fucking idea and thought this was going to be like summer camp. And, they couldn't stand up straight. They couldn't stand at attention. They wouldn't call out when the first sergeant or the XO or even the CO came onto the floor. All these things that, they even push, like, you need to pay attention to detail because not paying attention to detail is going to get you killed. Or as they would say, not paying attention to detail is going to get you fucked up. Speaking as far as with respect to basic, because they were there to, as my drill sergeants very sweetly stated several times, we're here to fuck you up for every time that you fuck up. And that, at a certain point, you get used to it, and you realize, oh, well, if somebody's locker isn't locked, or if the bathroom's not clean, or if somebody fell asleep on fire watch, everybody's going to get fucked up for that one, because we're supposed to be responsible for each other, making sure that nobody is fucking up.
How did you feel when he named Snowball Snowball?
When I was a kid, I didn't get it. When I was a teenager and an adult, I laughed and I don't think I laughed because it was funny. I laughed at the absurdity of it, and also just the overt racism that's applied with that name. And after he gives that speech about, and I'm going to do the speech because James isn't allowed to do this, where he says, I don't care if you're a nigger, a spick, a wop, a greaser, where he basically throws out all these racial epithets and pejoratives. And he's talking about, I'm not racist, but I'm going to say all this racist shit.
Yeah, he says there is no racial bigotry here. Yeah. It's not even I'm not racist, but like it's straight. No, that doesn't exist here. Now let me use all these derogatory terms.
Well, and then says, and this is part of that. I'm going to see if I can break you to if you retaliate against me. But when he tells Private Snowball, or newly entitled Private Snowball, oh, there's no fried chicken and watermelon in my corps. It's to provoke a reaction to see exactly what this guy's going to do. Is he going to jump up in the drill instructor's face? No. Is he going to cry, or is he going to, give some sign of weakness that the drill instructor can hone in on? Because that's what they're looking for. For any of you who are planning on joining the military, just understand this: it's all a fucking head game in basic. It's all about seeing what you're gonna react to, how you're gonna be provoked, how you respond to it.
Well, and Snowball is instantly made the squad leader. Like, yeah. And so it had to be part of not reacting to that, which I don't even think that Hartman was trying. That was like the lowest level of trying that he does in the entire fucking movie. Most of his insults are way better than that.
Well, they are. But, the ones that you would hear in those of you been to basic, whether it was Army or you went to boot camp for the Marines, it's all basically the same fucking script. It's like, oh, what are you looking at? Not, and you respond like, oh, you're looking at, the wrong answer is always, I was looking at you, drill sergeant. I was looking at you, sergeant. Or they would say something like, why are you looking at me like that? Are you in love with me? No, drill sergeant. Why not? Am I not good enough for you? No, drill sergeant. What the fuck is your problem? Am I not your type? So there is no right answer. And I think drill instructor Hartman has a similar situation in this movie where he kind of says the same thing, like, oh, I'm not pretty enough for you. But it's all to provoke some type of reaction in somebody, hoping that they're going to retaliate or they're going to show up and show out some other kind of way to earn a smoke session.
Well, he does a similar thing with Joker, where he brings up the Virgin Mary, and Joker says that he doesn't believe, and then Hartman keeps pushing him on it, and then Joker's like, "Sir, it's the private's belief that any answer will be incorrect, and that the drill instructor will, basically eat me alive if I change my choice now." And then Hartman just kind of stares at him and then calls Snowball over, and he's like, "Snowball, you're no longer in charge. Joker's the squad leader now."
Yeah.
So yeah, similar thing. I like that.
Yeah, that's how that shit works. It's seeing who figures stuff out. So like in one of my units, which was interesting, the older guys, we started trying to mentor the younger guys and saying, like, here's how we don't get fucked up. Here's how this happens. Here's how this. So early on, like 4 of us got picked to be the squad leaders, and not like officially by the drill instructor, drill sergeant. We all decided, all right, you're in this squad, you're in this squad, you're in this squad. Each one of us will just be the squad leader, and then we'll go ahead and have a PL for right now, a platoon leader, or a PL for that time. And we had one of the guys standing out front, and one of the drill sergeants came over and was like, "What are you guys doing?" He's like, "Oh, I'm keeping my unit in line." It's like, we haven't gotten to that part of basic training yet. Why do you guys already have a PL and squad leaders? It's like, oh, no, we're just taking initiative, drill sergeant. Now, he wasn't our drill sergeant at the time, so he's like, all right, carry on. And he walked the fuck off. And it was kind of like, I can't fuck them up because they're not doing anything wrong. And I can't fuck them up because they haven't been told that they couldn't do it. And I definitely can't fuck them up because they're all in formation early, because on time is wrong. They're all in formation early. They're staying at attention. Nobody's saying shit. I can't fucking do it. So he just carry on, walked the fuck on, and went back to his unit. And I think he smoked them for not being ready. I can't remember, but I remember I know they got smoked, but it might have been something else. But part of me was thinking, like, why the fuck can't y'all be like second platoon? And maybe somebody was cutting up or making them look bad or whatever. But I remember they got smoked right after that. But part of me thinks that he might have been smoking them to see if anybody over in our area would have cracked or looked over to see them getting smoked, because then that would have given him the excuse to come over and fuck us up. But yeah, it was, yeah.
So
interesting times.
I want to move to a different part of Hartman's representation here, because this is one that I'm not sure is representative of reality. Maybe I'm wrong. Like I said, I've never done it, so I don't know. But Hartman is very physically abusive.
Not anymore.
So he's not anymore? Or
no, I'm saying, like, that's not a reality
alert.
Anymore. It can happen, but it's not a reality anymore. Like, the understanding is drill sergeants or drill instructors weren't supposed to put their hands on you anymore until the like late 90s, early 2000s. Well, I should say late 90s because early 2000s when I was in. They weren't supposed to put their hands on you. But there was a catch. If they thought you were about to hit them, they could hit you. And it had to be an imminent threat, like, oh, this private was about to swing on me, so I hit him.
Huh. This sounds strangely reminiscent of something in my own community.
Uh-huh. And then the other one was when we have combatives. You had no shortage of drill sergeants who were volunteering for combatives, and that was basically they got to punch you in the face, and with boxing gloves. But they got to punch you in the face, and all you were supposed to do was defend yourself without hitting them back. So you had to take them to the ground. But yeah, there was no shortage, whether it was in basic, OCS, or even in the specialty schools. When it was time for combatives, as far as getting your certification, whether it was 1, 2, or 3, there was no shortage of NCOs or actual drill sergeants that wanted to fuck up somebody.
So what is the point of that? Because it's not teaching me what to do in a real fight. In a real fight, I'm going to punch him in the face. Well,
you're supposed to take the person to the ground as if, the two of you are fighting and you're grabbing their arm, take them to the ground. And this was the way it was explained to us, because it never made sense to me, because my instinct is going to be to punch back. But it was supposed to be protecting your face so you didn't get concussed, or, protecting your head, take the person to the ground, possibly disarm them, and then detain. Or get them to the ground, and hopefully, because the training that we had was, such and such percentage, some bullshit percentage that somebody threw out, such and such percentage of fights go to the ground. And if you get to the ground, you need to know how to handle yourself when you get to the ground. Because you might be in a fight and you run out of ammunition, run out of rounds in the fight. I'm thinking, like, that sounds like poor fucking preparation to me. But you need to be able to hold
Star Wars to me.
Yeah, exactly. You might run out of you might run out of rounds in a fight, and you might have to go hand to hand with somebody, and you need to hold them there long enough to where somebody in your unit can subdue them with a weapon or whatever. All the excuses didn't make any sense to me, but it was one of those things that at a certain point, you're broken from that whole, let me ask a question because this shit doesn't make sense. Yeah. And that's part of that whole taking your individuality away. You understand, I can think this shit, but I better not say it out loud. But yeah, the whole idea was they're coming at you swinging with these boxing gloves, and you have to protect yourself, then hook them, take them to the ground.
See, and that's not what Hartman does at all. Hartman just randomly attacks people. Yeah. He's like, hey, I like you. You can come over to my house and fuck my sister. And then he knees Joker in the nuts. And I'm like, well, that's not nice. Now his sister's going to be all disappointed. Like, what was the point of that?
It's the hyper masculinity that's in the military, at least was in the military then. It still exists to this day. And a lot of people have problems with undoing that shit when they get out.
Well, and that's a big problem.
Do. I mean,
like the straight like domestic violence type shit that Hartman does, like where he's like, you can't tell left from right, so he like slaps him and he's like, was that the right or the left? Then he slaps him again. Was that the right or the left? Like, and it's such a power and control, and it just so easily mirrors and, in my opinion, probably flows into domestic violence situations. And I don't know, that was really getting to me watching it.
No, and it should get to you that way, because that's practically what it is. There are people at least in the veteran community, who watch this movie and hate drill instructor Hartman or love him. And, looking at him objectively, he's not a hero.
Oh, no, absolutely not.
He's the kind of person that, a different generation might argue, oh, well, that's who I want to train me. But that doesn't do anything as far as your training and your preparation for actual warfare. And it doesn't do it doesn't do that much to make your experience one that, you know, has him as a mentor, as an effective mentor.
Wait, so the Viet Cong aren't over there just calling you a fat ass and insulting your family?
No, they're shooting at you and stuff. So the thing that would make and laying booby traps. So the thing that would make more sense is to focus on marksmanship, which is, you know, of course, what Private Pyle gets really good at. You know, in more ways than one.
Yeah, he does.
But, you know, focusing on that and focusing on war tactics, but, you know, at least the psychological element itself, I get the idea of having it to prep people to deal with stress or stressful situations, but that can be done in so many different ways. But it also lets you know, what the mentality was of the military and that approach in the time that this movie's representing. Because you know, our drill instructors fucked with us, called us nicknames, or gave us nicknames, called us names, did all types of stuff. But yeah, it's one of those things that they were more concerned with getting you to respond to the stress of, I'm yelling at you while you got to shoot this weapon. Oh, I'm going to make a shitload of noise while you have to do this. Oh, I'm going to wake you up earlier tomorrow because you never know when, you know, the enemy might be attacking. They're not going to wait and attack you at 12 o'clock or at 1 o'clock. You know, you're supposed to get up at 6. Oh, fuck it. I'm going to wake all of you up at 4:30 because, oh shit, get out of the building. We're under attack. You know, those types of things work because it gets you in a situational to understand that you should always be prepared. You should always be ready. And, you know, at least with the modern day experience compared with what's represented in the film, you know, you have that weapons training there, that understanding of you should always have your weapon with you. You should always know where your weapon is. Because
is my rifle.
Yeah. If something happens, you need to respond quickly. And you can't be, you know, looking around and saying, oh, well, shit, I don't know where I left my rifle.
So I want to go back to two things that you said earlier to talk about a couple of my favorite scenes. You mentioned leaving your footlocker unlocked and how people can get to your crayons. And there's this great scene where Private Pyle's footlocker is unlocked. Mm-hmm. And so Hartman starts dumping everything and he finds a jelly donut. Number one, like, I'm surprised the jelly donut made it that far because I'll be honest, I could not save the jelly donut for later. I might eat 4 of them right now, but I'm not going to save it.
Before you go any further, I'm going to tell you I have a big problem with that scene. Not because of what happens, but when you're in basic, maybe it was different back then. I lost 20 pounds in basic because there were no fucking sweets anywhere.
Exactly.
But somehow he has a fucking jelly donut.
And he says that he got it like in the mess hall. And I'm like, from who?
No,
was like some black market guy in there?
There's no possible way that he got that because I don't even remember having any type of pastry the entire 12 weeks I was that I was in basic and in the transitional. Like, I did not see a pastry itself until like graduation day. And I left that unit and went somewhere else and maybe got dinner with my family or something on the way. But it was one of those things of like, there's no fucking way this didn't happen. But it's one of those things I feel like it had to have been some other, like, it would have made more sense that it was a dinner roll or something.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that it's almost comedic effect in a way, but yeah, it really pulls me out because even having never been in the situation, I'm like, I find it hard to believe that this would be there when the point is basic training. But also, I just don't believe that the military would be wasting money on this for everybody. Like maybe in the officers club, but yeah, it really threw me off. But so we get this moment where everyone else gets punished and Pyle has to stand there and eat his jelly donut, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I love this because it goes back to what you were saying, where we're supposed to be watching each other and being a panopticon of people, making sure everyone's conforming. And instead, they start punishing the others, which leads to my next favorite scene I feel terrible saying favorite scenes, but the scenes I basically look forward to when I'm watching this movie, and the soap in the towel is again another reason I didn't sign up. I was like, oh man, that would definitely happen to me because I would fuck up a lot. So they get their bars of soap, put them in towels or socks or whatever, and they take turns beating Private Pyle's ass in his bed. And so while I doubt that something happened on that level, or if it did, you probably don't want to talk about it. But was there anything like what was the retaliation when all of you were punished for somebody? Like was there retaliation like that, or were you just like
there were retaliations,
fuck you,
or at least there was a lot of. Here, I'm going to tell on myself for a little bit. If someone fucked up and you were already at that breaking point, you started to say some shit to people that you normally wouldn't say. And you'd make threats that you wouldn't normally make to people. So it was like little stuff like, oh, somebody, you took the trash out, but then after the trash was taken out, you swept the floor and put dirt back in the trash can. And if Drill Sergeant saw it, now he's going to fuck us up over it. I remember one of these incidents. We were all supposed to be towing the line in front of our beds, in front of our bunks. And I knew who did it. Or I'm sorry, I think I thought I knew who did it. And just said, and this is one of those moments, like very few people have ever seen me angry, because you won't like it when I'm angry. But this was part of that breaking you down and build you into this machine that's going to see things a different way. But I remember standing on the line, and the drill sergeant had left, and he was like, "Oh, all of you better be back. Better not move from this spot." And gave some speech, and then walked out. Right. And I just stood there, like staring straight off. I was like, "Whichever one of you motherfuckers did that, better come forward, because I swear to God, I will fucking end you. I will throw you down the fucking stairs." Said if I have to push one more goddamn time, I will fucking break both your goddamn legs and your arms and roll your fucking ass down the stairs if I have to. But it was just, and then people were like, "God damn, what the fuck is wrong with Guillory?" And I'm like, I said, "I swear to God, I will fucking kill you. I will kill you in your sleep." So it was, but the thing is, that was so common. Like everybody had their moment where they're like, "Oh man, I'm gonna fuck somebody up." And especially when we had like pugil rounds where, you've seen the pugil, like American Gladiators. Yeah. There were moments where people were waiting for that type of stuff because you're like, "Oh man, this dude fucked me over the other day." And you could call them out. So in combatives or in pugils, you could call them out, but you could only do it on those days. So a lot of times it was, I'm waiting for Thursday or I'm waiting for Friday and I'm going to fuck so-and-so up.
So it's like counting down to the purge. Yes.
But there were moments where there was kind of this push to have this collective punishment. So we figured, because we had older guys and younger guys. So we figured out a way to make it work. Somebody fucks up, you got a longer fire watch schedule. So everybody was supposed to do 30 minutes, right? So you got your 7 to 8 hours that we're going to be sleeping or supposed to be sleeping. And 2 people work every 30 minutes. If you fucked up that day and we caught you before the drill sergeant caught you, you got an hour. And so that was kind of how it worked. And so because a good number of people fucked up and agreed to this thing, there were some of us who didn't pull fire watch for like a week. So we found a way to do it. But there was this one point where a guy who was on my side of the bay had screwed up somehow. He left something out or like the first sergeant walked past him and he didn't warn everybody before he came in. And, we got smoked and we had to actually take our mattresses off the beds and we had to do shoulder presses with the mattresses. So, one person's on one end, one person on the other, and we're just doing shoulder presses until, we were basically told to stop doing it. So everybody's doing it, including the person who got in trouble. And this one Weasley guy was like, "Oh, that's it. It's a fucking soap party tonight." And
damn.
Yeah. And so I'm like, "No, it's not." I said, "If you fucking touch him, I'm going to fuck you up." And so, because I said, if you were to have a soap party on him, how the fuck you gonna explain it the next day when he's got all these bruises and shit? We're just gonna beat the fuck out of this one guy, and it's gonna be okay. And it was just one of those things where I'm not gonna mention the guy's name because I can remember to this day. And I'm like, you touch him, I'm gonna fuck you up. And it was one of those moments where, the guy across the way saw me and knew I was serious with it. And he was like, yeah, I'm gonna shut the fuck up. And it's not that I'm trying to purport myself as some big badass, but that was one of those moments where I did not give a shit. Yeah, and I was ready to fight half the people there.
Wow. So the thing I love about this scene is that it is the exact moment that Joker completely loses his individuality. Mm-hmm. At least during Basic. Like, he gets it back, as we'll see. But it's the moment everyone else has taken a turn and hit Pyle once being the key word here. Joker goes last. And he's standing there making a decision. And Cowboy's like, just do it, man. And then Joker looks Pyle in the eye and just fucking unloads on him.
Yeah.
He hits him 6 times. I sat there and counted it because I was like, he just unleashes all of his frustration, but he's also just gone to that next level. He's conformed. He's part of the group now. And, it really struck me as being reminiscent of bullying as well, because one person that could sort of be your friend has completely joined the enemy. And I'm really fucking surprised. Like, not surprised because Joker wrote the book and Joker, fucking, he's the point of the movie. But like, I'm amazed that Pyle doesn't shoot him because he has him at that shot, you know, and doesn't take it. And we'll get there in a second. Spoiler alert. But, I'm like, that's the moment where Pyle could have easily gotten revenge for this moment where Joker thinks he's getting revenge. And I think that says a lot about society in general, of how we try to revenge always one-ups. And so it's never even. And that's why things get so fucking out of control. And I'll bet if Joker had that moment back later, he would have never fucking swung that towel. But yeah. So let's go ahead. Let's move on to the moment Pyle loses his shit completely. So that was the scene that scared the living fuck out of me when I was a kid. And a lot of that is Kubrick. It's the use of the flashlight and how it's reflecting in the camera, and it's the darkness that's only lit by the light going into the bathroom area. Like, none of the other lights are on. If all the lights were on, that scene would not be nearly as terrifying as it is. It would still be scary, but it wouldn't be the way that it is. And that's Kubrick just building a beautiful scene. Like, the fucking shots of Pyle looking crazy as fuck and staring and almost drooling. Like, that's horror movie gold right there. And so, he's got his rifle because you always have to have it with you. And, he's loading it and he's talking about it. And he says that it's a 7.62 millimeter Full Metal Jacket, where we finally get the name of the film in there. And Joker's like, some serious shit's about to go down, but he doesn't run. He doesn't get out of there. Like, he's still like, what can I do to maybe talk you down? Or maybe he's guessing what's happening. Maybe he doesn't fully know, But then Hartman, in typical Hartman fashion, comes busting through the door. What the fuck's going on in here? And blah, 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 blah. And
why
Joker's
are you not
like,
stomping him into a mud hole.
Yeah. And Joker's like, I feel like it's my duty to tell you that that's fucking loaded. He doesn't say it in those words, of course. But, and then Hartman has that very, very brief moment of, oh shit. But he instantly turns it off. And he just mans up and he's still going in full Hartman mode. Just, Pyle, I need you to give me that weapon and you're going to put it down. And I don't know the exact wording, but he's like, you're going to set it on the floor and you're going to step away from it and blah, 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 blah. and then Pyle's like, or here's another option. And he pulls the fucking trigger, right? And you just get that beautiful shot of Hartman's chest exploding as the Full Metal Jacket rips through him. And again, that is a horror movie gold moment of shooting right there. And that's why this scene is so ingrained in me, you know? But the look on Joker's face, like there's nowhere to go. If you run, he's going to shoot you in the back. If you make a move, he's going to shoot you. If you stand there, he's probably going to shoot you. There's nothing left to do. And all of his training and all of his conforming have left him completely fucking vulnerable, and he's alone. There's no one else there. They're not busting in to save his ass. Hartman told them all to go back to bed. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Like, once Pyle is doing his routine as far as the right shoulder, left shoulder.
I forgot to mention how creepy that is. Like, that's a thing that's not normally creepy, and they did such a great job of making that scary as fuck.
Yeah, he was in there doing his drilling ceremony, which, if you've ever done it, it's very fucking tedious. It's very ridiculous. But it's one of those things that gets into this whole idea of attention to detail and uniformity. But yeah, just the idea that he's sitting in there by himself, and it even kind of calls into question: was he just going to go in there and kill himself? Initially, was he going to sit in there, load the weapon and then shoot himself in the head if no one had come in? But it's almost like you get a 2-4. He gets to go ahead and kill Hartman before he kills himself.
I feel like he would have still gone for Hartman. I don't know that he would have bothered with anyone else. But like when he's out on the range and he's showing his expertise with the rifle, if you will, like I feel like the way he looks at Hartman, it's almost like I'm picturing you, motherfucker.
Right.
So like, I feel like it was always there. So I'm not sure, but I've actually often wondered that, like, would he have just shot himself? And I don't think so, because I feel like the precision that he goes through with the routine says there had to be an audience.
And Joker just happened to be there when he was doing Firewatch.
Yeah, Joker happened to be the audience. But yeah, I feel like he would have done it for Hartman if Hartman had walked in, or anybody else. I feel like it just had to be that routine, and it had to be, look, I've conformed. How fucking great. Fuck you, But
that whole line that he has of, I am in a world of shit. That part right there, not just what he says, but the way he says it completely expresses that there is no turning back for him. Like he's been broken down so much, and it gets into discussions about abuse, but also about mental health. Because in all honesty, there were very few films that were talking about the mental health of veterans and service members. Because if Pyle had gone through a physical or psychological evaluation prior to going to the military, or prior to being drafted, or even after he'd been drafted, but prior to going into the military, he would have been rejected. So, it kind of opens it up to that aspect of, was he, did he actually have, a physical where they talked about this, or was it kind of one of those things that often happens within the military medical evaluations, the initial medical evaluations, that almost became a joke. It was like, oh, if you got a heartbeat, you'll be able to go in.
One thing I skipped at the beginning is Pyle is a very happy guy at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Like when he's getting his head shaved, he's got this little smile that no one else has. Everyone else is like straight faced and just sitting there. And then like the reason that Hartman picks on him is he can't stop giggling.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, being a physically abusive domestic violence asshole, Hartman holds out his hand and makes Pyle choke himself with Hartman's hand.
Mhm.
And that's the beginning of the breaking point. Like, that's when the giggle box is gone, and then the breakdown begins. And I meant to mention that sooner, but we'll throw it in here instead. So, I mean, you want to talk loss of individuality. Like, there's nothing left of the original Leonard when it gets to this point. So, yeah. You want to make a killing machine? They made a killing machine. I'm just amazed that he didn't unleash on everyone else there.
I was going to say that it may have just been because Hartman was the one who was responsible for them treating him that way.
Yeah.
So that might be why, he didn't involve anybody else in that.
And that's where I turned the movie off, because that's what everyone does, right? I'm just kidding.
No, most people watch the second half that gets into,
You'd actually be surprised how many of my friends only watched the first half of this movie.
You're
because we were
shitting
just
me.
talking about this. No, like even the great Brian Savage and I were talking about this, and he was saying he knows a ton of people that only watch the first half and then don't watch the rest. For me, it is something I've literally done, because
You can
after
argue
that,
it's two separate movies.
I do believe it's two separate movies. I absolutely do. I feel like it's two novellas instead of a novel. And I mean, even the way it's cut from a film point of view feels like a new show. Mm-hmm. Like, this hits. Oh, we forgot the big part here. So then, Pyle pops the gun in his mouth and blows his head off. There, see, we forgot that part. That's an important.
We didn't forget it.
But so then it cuts into the next novella, if you will, and everything just changes. But this goes back to my theory of how it's cut like memories are. It's these huge moments that you can't forget. We don't get like the whole, hours of travel to get over there and all that kind of shit, or what's going on in Joker's head as he's thinking about all this stuff. We just go directly into a point a little ways down the road. And I love that cut, because you do just lose everybody. Like, I would compare this version of Basic to basically like new hire training. Like, at my job, there were 16 people in my new hire training, right? But I'm the only one that stayed in the admin building, and I'm the only one in the grants department. So, like, I don't see these people again. Like, we all just go our separate ways. And I love how the film is cut in that same vein, where Joker's going somewhere no one else is going, so we just don't follow up with them for a while. We just move on to Joker's life after this. And so my question to you is, what happened after Basic for you?
I stayed in the same on the same base, so I just transferred to my next unit and went through all the training and stuff there. Actually, you know what? This brings me to a good point with, or at least a good connection with Pyle's character. Was when I was when I was getting my bars, when I was in officer candidate school, when we graduated, there was one of the recruits, or one of the newly barred lieutenants, who killed his wife and himself, like, I think not even a few days after graduation. I don't even think it was a full week. And it was not too similar to Pyle, but it was one of those things. There was domestic violence involved and possible PTSD, because he was a prior service guy. And no one knew what was taking place, because unless if it hadn't been for their children or their child, because the kid was at school and the parents normally picked him up from school. Either the mom or the dad picked him up from school, and the kid was there, and they just called home, sent the police for a welfare check, and then found them dead. And there were kind of questions as to, what stresses he had been under, or what type of exposure he had succumbed to in order to do that. But yeah, when it comes to changing your duty stations themselves, aside from the paperwork, it's pretty fucking uneventful. Like, it's either you're traveling on the government's tab, or you're driving yourself, and then you just get reimbursed for the days that you were gone. I'm sorry, the travel that you had to pay for, whether it was gas or hotels or anything like that. But that shit is so uneventful. It's so boring.
Well,
So
I
I
mean,
can see
it's
why
not
they-
like you were serving during Vietnam, so
Right.
you're not going to go directly to what
No,
these
no.
guys are going to or
No,
anything like
'cause
that.
you
But that's
gotta-
why I was curious.
No. It depends on what your MOS is. Like if you were infantry, if you were basic, and you were infantry or military police, and you had finished what's known as your AIT, your advanced individual training, odds are when you were done, you were going to Iraq or Afghanistan. But if you were more specialized as far as your training, things like intel, signal corps, stuff like that, finance, medical. Well, I shouldn't say medical because medical will go. Finance, and I forgot what the adjutant general. Odds are you weren't going to any of those places. You'd go to, you'd stay stateside, or you might get deployed to one of the foreign bases. Go to Japan, go to Germany, something like that. But the combat support guys didn't go immediately in a lot of cases.
Wow.
But yeah, with it being Vietnam, and that was what they were being trained for, they were going straight there.
Huh.
But even as you see Joker in this movie, it's remarkable because he gets that individuality back to where you see him as kind of this smart ass reporter working for the Stars and Stripes. And then even when it comes to, how much of an individual and a smart ass that he is, when he's talking to, I think, the lieutenant or captain, the one who's running the paper, he has enough freedom in that regard as far as what he's doing to basically make the smart ass comments that he does, where it's kind of like, hey, if we don't have enough kills, why don't we say it was a general? We could pump it up. We can pump up. We can expand it a little bit more. And then the captain, instead of like chewing his ass out, because that might have, or lieutenant might have been the case, he just says, "Look, we got one job to do here. Let's do X, Y, and Z. Fuck all this other stuff. We don't need to bullshit too much. But when we do write these stories, we need to give the grunts something good to read because they want to hear about somebody being dead."
Yep.
But yeah, the second part for me, I mean, the first part is always a good one to watch because it's more realistic as to the approach that of what basic feels like with respect to a movie. The second part is what it feels like to actually be in the military. It's the same bullshit. I mean, the only variable that you have is if you're in a combat zone. But it's the same bullshit that you're dealing with day to day. Even the guy who serves as his cameraman was Rafter Man or something like that.
Yeah.
But he works the camera. This guy's so full of shit. Like he said, there's like, I want to be part of the shit. I need to go out where the action is. I need to do this. And the first time he goes, he fucking freaks out. And it's
he's like dry heaving on the helicopter.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's part of that fake bravado, and it's part of that bravado where, unfortunately, a lot of us, and this is more for dudes, a lot of us feel as though in certain situations we have to be more of a man, or at least show that we're a man somehow, up to a certain age. I mean, some people never outgrow it, but up to a certain age, you're kind of like, oh well, this guy's doing this. Fuck it, I'm not as tough as this guy, so I need to do this, or I'm not playing this sport. I need to try this one. So it's interesting in this respect because you'll see this in the military even today, where if you're out in the field and some guys are working out, because there's a lot of physical, even in the Army, there's this whole controversy over the new physical fitness test. But there's this whole thing about if somebody's working out, it's comparing the amount of push-ups and sit-ups you did compared to them, or how fast their time was for running compared to yours. It's just one of those things that some of us got into, some of us didn't give a shit about.
I have never given a shit about bravado at all, as anyone who's ever met me has known.
Consider yourself lucky. Well, I don't know, man. You and I have been to a buffet before, and we get competitive.
I challenge you to a face-off at the Rio in Vegas. All right.
Done. Is that Vegas Con I hear on the line?
If you're from a Vegas convention, please get a hold of us ASAP. All right. So, my big problem with the second half is, as you know, I'm not a huge fan of war movies, action movies, any of that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts to feel very much like all the others. So the stuff that does stick out to me, I really love, like Animal Mother, or
Mm-hmm.
like that scene where they do the little photo op with the dead guy.
Right.
Like I had
Here's
never
my
seen
friend.
that done before. I love that, as horrible as it is.
Mhm.
It's such a great moment, and it really sums up that mentality as well,
Well, speaking of that mentality, and talked about the hypermasculinity, but there's also that hypersexualization as well. Because I think when you first see Joker in Vietnam, he's out in that cafe, and the prostitute comes up to, which, of course, those of you who are in my generation remember that this is part of Uncle Luke, 2 Live Crews. I can't believe I just shout out Uncle Luke. Part of 2 Live Crews. The album that ended up getting them banned in several places and became at least led to their anthem about free speech. But they take that line that the Vietnamese prostitute has and weave it into their song. But when she's walking across and you got the Nancy Sinatra, these boots were made for walking, and she's going up to these American GIs and then telling them openly, I'll give you sucky, me so horny, we love you long time. Oh, for $15, you get everything, and then she starts exposing herself out on the street. And it turns to this thing that, from talking to Vietnam vets who were there, situations like that happen, but not to that extreme. But what the film does, it helps reinforce it, that over-sexualization and that kind of fetishization of Asian women as well. But it's even the way that they treat these women, because the women themselves, other than near the end of the film, the women are not seen as powerful characters at all. The women are seen as almost bystanders in the war. Either they happen to be farmers, prostitutes, or spies. Like there's no in between that's given with that. And what's disturbing as far as the way it's represented in this film is, these are the stories that these guys will then go home and tell, people about, like, oh, these Asian women, they'll do anything. This is, these are the crazy stuff that you can get for $5. And because it hasn't changed, because a friend of mine, when we were in together, was talking about, hey man, when we're on leave, we need to go to Thailand because the girls there are wild. They'll do anything for this, for that. And I'm sitting there like, cool. You enjoy your trip to Thailand. I'm going to stay here because none of that sounds too appealing. But it gets into I guess, reinforcing that idea of hypermasculinity, because these two guys, they're debating having sex with a prostitute, but then they get into the reasons of why they should, not why we shouldn't, but why we should be going with this woman. And they start bargaining as far as like, oh, let's do it for this much. And even, this idea of both of them are going to try. So it's not, not this, this moral issue of, hey, we probably shouldn't be doing this. It becomes an issue of security, which is, well, if she's sick, if she has VD, then she's not working for the Viet Cong. If if she's a Viet Cong prostitute, then she's going to, slit our throats. So the thing is, look for any of the ones that cough. And, the entire time she's talking to them, she coughs a few times to indicate that she probably has VD in some way. But yeah, that scene, and then the later scene where there's another prostitute and her pimp that show up, it's really telling it, at least in the 1960s and 70s, with racial attitudes and this high idea again of hypersexualization of the female Asian body.
Absolutely. I mean, as you know, like the nonprofit I work at helps kids who have been human traffic victims, among many other programs that we have. So it's one of those things I've really started paying attention to in movies. Not even just like not necessarily their portrayal so much as their message to everybody. And I do feel that a lot of war movies push this. It's okay. They're not human. They're the enemies. So it's fine. And that really bothers me a lot. But this is the one movie. Again, I haven't watched a lot of war movies, so maybe there's more. But this is the one that I've seen where the prostitute is the one who basically makes a racial decision. And she's like, I can't sleep with this black guy because black guys have too much penis.
She says, no soul brother too big.
There we go.
I remember that scene because then he comes back and says, honey, I can assure you this is, what was it? Genuine Alabama black snake, which even in that part, I'm sitting there like, how more of a racial stereotype can you get with the voice that he has with it? Like, hey, baby, want to let you know this is genuine. Like, I was expecting for him to like do the jazz hands while he was doing it. But
I double checked to make sure that it wasn't Robert Downey Jr. playing a black guy because it was that stereotypical.
Yeah, it was. And it again, it gets into one of those things. But what's really crazy to me, even after that part, is how fucked up of a person Animal Mother is and how much racism is portrayed in this film. And it's kind of like, that's just Animal Mother. He's crazy. I'm like, he just called you the N-word, dude. Like, seriously. Like,
yeah, but at the same time, do you want to get in Animal Mother's way? Like, I love how Animal Mother sits there and watches all this shit, and then he's like, that's great. I'm fucking her first. And he takes her, and nobody can do anything about it, you know?
Well, nobody questions it, and that almost becomes one of those things of putting up a good enough front or putting up a good enough I guess presentation of your image to other people to where they buy it, to where, they're talking about Animal Mother later, like, oh, he's an all right guy. And, he'll have no problem fitting in the world as long as people continue throwing grenades at him for the rest of his life. So, there's some people that definitely are adrenaline junkies, and that may be Animal Mother's case. But then there are complete sociopaths, like the guy in the helicopter, who's just shooting at people because he can.
Yeah.
Shooting at, when Joker and Rafter Man are going out to meet Animal Mother and all in this one unit, it's interesting the way that even that scene has been used, or the language of that scene has been used within the military, and even military groups, where you talk about get some, and they're not fully processing what that scene means. The guy shooting, and Joker even questioned this. It's like, how do you shoot women and children? And he's like, well, I just try not to lead as much, as far as leading the M60 as much, so he can actually get a better shot or a higher kill count. But the fact that Joker even asked that question shows that he's broken away from that dehumanization of the enemy, and he's understanding like this. Some of this shit ain't right, but I can't say anything about it.
Well, I think that Joker really had that moment with Pyle, and that's what changed everything, because then as soon as you see Joker again, he's making jokes, he's growing his hair out, he's wearing the peace symbol constantly, and he's written "Born to Kill" on his helmet. But you can tell it's very tongue-in-cheek and very, like, this is what's expected of me, so this is the image I give off, Animal Mother, on the other hand, I want to talk about Animal Mother for a minute, because there's many things about Animal Mother that I find really strange, and none of them are normal things that everyone talks about.
Is this with respect to the person who's actually plays Animal Mother who said some interesting things? Or
No.
Okay.
But did you know that Arnold Schwarzenegger was originally supposed to be Animal Mother?
Well,
I think that's no, really. I read it when I was looking stuff up about this. I thought that was crazy. But
okay, O.J. Simpson was supposed to be the Terminator. He was supposed to be Animal Mother. Awesome.
There you go. So first off, I want to know, what the fuck did this guy do that they nicknamed him Animal Mother? Like, that's crazy.
He's an animal motherfucker.
I want to know the story behind this, and I want great detail on it. My second thing is on his helmet, it says, "I am become death." Now, I don't know if you know what that is, but I got my master's degree in the history of nuclear weapons, and "I am become death" is what Oppenheimer said after they used the atomic bomb. And I refuse to believe for a single fucking second that Animal Mother, A, knows that, B, gives a shit about it, and C, that he would write that on his helmet. But I'm also like, I can't picture anyone else having the balls to say, hey, let's go write on Animal Mother's helmets. So the whole thing is just very off to me. Like, I don't feel like it fits his character at all.
I'm telling you, it just might be an act.
Very strange.
He might be a very smart guy, very cool, calm, and collected guy, but it's kind of like, this is what the fuck I have to do to survive.
I don't know.
So if I have to let people know I'm the craziest son of a bitch out here, I'm going to do it.
And I want to send another shout out to the great Brian Savage for pointing out that Animal Mother thinks that he's invincible as long as he has his giant gun, right? Because he mentioned this right before I get to the scene where Animal Mother goes running through the area to get to his fallen comrades. And he really does look like he just feels like nothing can happen to me. I have this gun. And so
that is like, an M60.
Thank you.
It's not a gun. That is an M60. It's a pig. It is nicknamed the Pig.
Why is it called the Pig?
Because it goes oink, oink, oink when you shoot it.
Huh.
No, it's just nicknamed the Pig. It's just like the A10 Warthog. It's called the Burt Burt because that's the sound that, I'm sorry, the sound it's given is referred to as a Burt Burt because, and some groups refer that's the sound of freedom. Burt Burt. Anyway.
But I really paid attention to his like whole demeanor in that part after Brian pointed this out to me, that he thinks he's invincible with it. And it really added to the scene for me. I've seen it a few times and I don't know, it's always been a decent scene, but like this time I really felt more for Animal Mother, like thinking he's invincible and then having that moment where he's like, oh shit. Like, I'm out here and, how do I get back, And then he just goes ballistic instead, because once again, there's nothing you can do at that point. So that brings us to the sniper. This sniper has taken out a bunch of people, including Cowboy, Joker's friend from basic training. And they're trying to get to the sniper, and they finally do. And we find out that the sniper is a young woman, bringing all of Joker's questions about killing women and children to the front.
And she's not a woman at that point. She's an enemy combatant, or at least to use, modern terminology.
Absolutely. And that's also like what Joker has to confront is, where are these lines and how do they keep shifting? And I love that because we come back to his complete individuality at this point. Like, he's pulled away and he's been a part of the war, but he's basically watching it. Now he's involved in it. And we get to this scene with the sniper, and Animal Mother wants to just fucking leave her there to die, right? Like, let her suffer. She killed our friends. Fuck this bitch. And she's laying there. First she's praying, and then she just keeps saying, shoot me. And she says it in this very pained, terrible way. Just shoot me, like end it, And Joker wants to shoot her, but it goes against everything Joker stands for at the same time. And I love this moment. This moment is the reason that I like the second half of the film. This moment is the reason I keep watching. And so my question to you is, do you feel that this moment is done correctly, number one? And number two, do you think that Joker would actually get a say in this? Like, would everybody just be like, fine, you decide then? Or would they like haul his ass out of there because they decided she should suffer?
Oh, that's a tough question, because from what I understand about the situation, I would see it. I would see it more as he would have taken the initiative if that was the moment. Just as Animal Mother was taking the initiative to say, well, let's fucking let her die. Let her suffer. Somebody would have probably walked up and said, no, that's a fucking stupid idea. She might not be, dying or whatever, or somebody might find her. Because if you compare this to another war film like Saving Private Ryan, there's that moment with one of the Nazis, one of the German soldiers, where they let him go, and he ends up killing, or it ends up becoming part of a unit that ends up killing the remaining forces that Captain Miller takes to go find Private Ryan. And the Corporal Upham is one of the guys, is the person who says initially, like, oh no, you need to let him go, this isn't right, he's a prisoner, we shouldn't kill him here, because they were making him dig his own grave at one point. Captain, you should let him go. But when they get back to this other battle line and this guy shows up and he says in German, oh, it's okay, guys, he won't shoot. And then Upham hears him in German, because he can speak German, and then shoots him, only him. And then tells all the other Germans, like, get over here and line up or submit. So it's one of those things that maybe there's that concern of this could come back on us, at least from Joker having that, at least the more critical thinking to go along with it, as far as, the way that the Vietnamese or the Viet Cong were fighting. But then also maybe one of those things of like, she killed my fucking friend.
Yeah, man. I mean, I don't know. Like, I've never been in a situation anything like that, so I really have no feedback on it. From a writing point of view, talking to a few
people who had been in that situation, they were mixed as well. The ones I had spoken to who were in Vietnam and similar things like this happened, as well as some that were in Iraq, or was he? It was in Iraq, where they had been in similar situations, and it came down to this same type of issue of like, what's going to happen if I do it? What's going to happen if I don't?
And like, from a writing point of view, it's perfect. Like, everything comes back. Like, he's, like I've said, he's gone through the giving up his individuality to be a part of the community, and then basically slowly losing it until he's once again alone to make a decision, even though everyone's still around him. And there's nothing scarier or sadder than being alone around a bunch of people. Mm-hmm. So he's once again an individual. And so none of his training has prepared him for this moment of having to make this choice, or at least not directly. I mean, I'm sure there's been experiences, blah, blah, blah. But like, this wasn't one of the scenarios they were playing out, And I love that part. I love that he's had this constant, well, what about women and children? What about women and children? And then she's not like 11, which I think would make it even more crazy, but she's young, like, he still can view her as a woman and a child. And so it's everything has led to this moment. So from a writing point of view, it's great. From a military point of view, I'm not positive, but I don't know. One thing I do want to go back to, because I accidentally skipped it. He's talking to, I want to say it's a general or something. I'm not positive.
It's a colonel. The guy
is a colonel, the one who asks him about his pin and his hat.
Yeah.
Okay, so helmet. He's like, how do you wear this peace symbol with your helmet that says "Born to Kill"? And he answers that he's interested in the duality of man. And I love that, because it's such a dick answer. It's 100% honest.
It's a Jungian thing, sir.
Yes, it's 100% honest, but it's also such a dick answer. It's, you're not going to fucking understand this anyway, but I'm going to entertain myself. And I love that. But that also goes back to how he's losing that connection to the community that he had in basic, like, he's not directly a part of it.
because I was waiting for you to bring this up. But that whole aspect, that conversation that they have, and then the colonel then goes in and says, it gives all these stupid fucking sports analogies like, oh, you need to get the ball and bring it on home, and and all this other shit. But the thing that stands out, that's horrifying from a historical perspective, and then somebody who's been into international relations and geopolitics, is he says inside every gook is an American crying to come out.
Yes.
So it's not just the racial factor, but also the idea that how the fuck are we the supreme ones in this situation? Like it becomes that aspect of American exceptionalism where, everybody needs to be like us.
Well, and if that's true, what are we slaughtering them for?
Well, it's one of those things, but here's the fucked up thing about this. And I was talking about this with one of my classes with this whole, actually in some of the tours, talking about how, it's once we dehumanize a group of people, you can do whatever the fuck you want to them. And, I saw this firsthand, and I was thinking about this morning, saw this firsthand when I was in basic, and the one of the drill sergeants who ended up getting reassigned, probably because he was, up to something he shouldn't have been doing, would refer to Middle Easterners as Hajis every fucking day. Oh, when you go down range and you have to face any of those Hajis, you got to do this. Oh, when you get down range, the Hajis are doing this. Oh, there are Haji guys doing blah, blah, blah. So at first we're like, what the fuck is a Haji? Then realize it's a slur against Arabs. It's the same as using the term gook for the Vietnamese. So one of the guys that was in our unit made some comment about like, man, there better not be any Hajis fucking with me when I get over there. And one of the other drill sergeants heard this. And what was admirable was not only did he, pay attention to what was being said, but he knew his duty as an EO officer, equal opportunity officers, basically the person that, if there are any type of racial, sexual orientation, sexual assault issues, whatever, any types of person-to-person issues, that's the person you bring it to, and he files a complaint. So he overhears this, and he says, "Who the fuck taught y'all about Haji?" Now, the first thing you should say is it's the same thing as jail. Somebody ever asks you a question, you don't fucking answer, or you just say, I heard it somewhere. You don't name the person, because he named the drill sergeant who had been saying, he said, oh yeah, drill sergeant so-and-so is always saying it. He goes up, finds this drill sergeant, and says, hey man, you can't just be going around saying Haji because, X, Y, and Z, this is the military. You can't be teaching that type of stuff here. So he comes back to the bay and smokes everybody because he got in trouble for using the term Haji around the recruits. And then they used it in front of somebody else. So he came into the room all pissed off, like, oh, you motherfuckers going to tell people I've been saying Haji? Get on the fucking ground. And I'm like, and I looked around, I was like, what the fuck just happened? So that was what took place was, this was back when I could pump out like 50, 60 push-ups with no problem. But I'll tell you right now, it's a bitch when you don't know when those push-ups are going to end.
What's a push-up?
It's those orange things that you put in the freezer.
Oh man, I could do like 40 of those.
But yeah, I mean, just because I talked about the hypervascularization, the racism, stuff like that, that gets thrown in. And in a lot of cases, a lot of it sadly gets excused. And, a lot of times we'll see these things within the military community where it's like, oh, there's no black, there's no white, there's no yellow, there's no red, it's only green. And there are a lot of us who are black, yellow, red, brown, who look at that and say that's complete bullshit. Because a good number of us have gone through racial incidents in the military. And by saying, hey, we're all the same color, that's the same as I don't see color or I'm not racist. All you're trying to do is get me on that same team to where I can't complain about the racial shit that happens to take place. Which, unfortunately, I saw a good bit, experienced a good bit, and had a good little bit reported to me at one point. But I don't know. Happy Veterans Day.
All right, so here's my final question before we wrap this up. I feel like, I'll answer mine afterwards. Do you think that there are war movies that do not classify as horror movies as well? And when I say that, I don't mean that the genres say that, but I'm saying like this feels very much like a horror movie to me. So do you feel that there are war movies that don't have that?
The only ones that I would say don't, as far as don't have the horror aspect or wouldn't fit into horror, are the ones that are more comedic. Or the bullshit ones like all the John Wayne war movies where, he happens to get hit, with a torpedo into his chest and the doctor pulls him out. It's just a flesh. That type of exaggerated war movie or the comedic war movies. Those are the ones I would say just don't fit in. But, to quote William Tecumseh Sherman, which is a great person to quote in the state of Mississippi, which is why I bring him up every day. It's hot in this motherfucker. Anyway, he has stated, to quote him, war is hell. And anything can happen. Anything can go wrong. There are all these things all these variables that you have to encounter. And I don't think that if you capture it on film, I don't think there's a way that it can be anything other than horror.
So for me, it goes to,
even a shitty movie like Pearl Harbor.
Yeah. For me, it goes to something my friend S.A. Bradley said. He says that horror is a feeling. Mm-hmm. And what he means by that is, does it terrify you? Does it scare you? Does it, leave some kind of lasting dark mark on you, basically? And so for me, it depends on the message of the film. So something like this, where they're showing the horrors of war, definitely horror to me, or at least like in that same vein. I wouldn't necessarily call it a full horror movie, but you know what I'm saying. But something like take the Green Berets, for instance, the John Wayne, since you brought him up. The Green Berets had one scene that scared the shit out of me as a kid, where there's this trap and this guy basically gets slammed into this fence of spikes. And that's probably where my love of Saw began. But outside of that, it's a very, I don't know, they tried to sort of make it anti-war, but I feel like there was a lot of America's still fantastic, America's this. And when it's a propaganda movie, especially a lot of horror movies are way more propaganda movies. Patton, for instance, that whole speech at the fucking beginning, things like that. When it's more propaganda, I definitely wouldn't put it in the same place, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't scare the fuck out of me. So I think in the end, every movie is individualized, and it's really, horror as a concept to me is completely individualized. I kind of hate that we have the genre of horror and that we have these people that are like, that wasn't horror. It wasn't scary to me. Fuck you. If it scares anybody, that makes it horror to them. And that's more where I am with the concept of horror, and in turn, war movies with horror aspects. It's all about that individual piece and what it makes me feel. So yeah.
Agreed.
All right. Do you have anything else to say about this film before we close this off?
Nothing specifically about this film. I highly recommend it for anybody who's interested in not just war movies, but especially war horror movies, because it hits on a lot of things, a lot of aspects that a lot of movies that we're talking about, specifically about Vietnam, we're still afraid to talk about. So it's a good test, at least in the 80s, this one as well as Platoon, and getting into what people were actually going through. And it went well beyond the war. I see the war as the backstory, or at least in the background of those two movies, because they're both about what people are dealing with. person to person, and then you happen to have the enemy shows up, and then it goes back to how are we engaging each other? How are we dealing with this overall issue? But no, I like this movie. It's one of those movies that I can watch and still get not a good feeling out of it, but I can still feel as though I'm getting something out of the movie, as opposed to some movies you watch and it's kind of like, shit, I just lost an hour and a half out of my life because this movie didn't age well, or it didn't, it didn't do anything for me anymore.
So my final thought on it, since I skipped it because apparently that's what I'm doing today, is originally Kubrick wanted Joker to die. And Matthew Modine fought it. And he was like, no, it's so much worse if he has to go home and live with all of this. He's like, that's where the horror of his life is. It's always having to deal with this. And I'm so fucking glad that they didn't kill Joker. I think that, honestly, I probably wouldn't care about it nearly as much. I would still love the first half, but I definitely wouldn't care about the second half as much if they wasted Joker.
Well, you know what? I'm going to change my final thought since you mentioned that.
I'm going to come up with 4 more.
No, don't do that, because then I'll have to come up with 5 more. With that, as far as the idea of having to come back with, and to live with what he had done and possibly never talk about it. What I would recommend to anybody who is listening, and this is one of my few, hey, please go out and do this type moments in the show. If you know of any military personnel or have military personnel friends or whatever, check in on them, especially those that have been deployed. And this is not a, hey, pat them on the back and do all this other stuff. Ask them if they need something. Because there's something that's not being addressed by certain administrations that claim that they love veterans. But, fuck it, I'm going for it. Here's what I really want to say. And James knows how I feel about this. I don't give a shit about anybody's political views that happen to be listening to this show. It's not one of those things where I'm going to sit there and say, oh, well, I'm worried about offending somebody on the right or somebody on the left, or God forbid, offending libertarians. If you're listening to this show, you definitely picked the wrong show. But there are people that are in office that claim to love veterans, but love fucking over veterans because they love nothing more than to say that they love veterans. I implore you, if you have any of these people in your district that go on and on about supporting the troops and supporting the veterans, ask them what they have done to support veterans with legislation, with funding for the VA, which is sorely underfunded, which lends them to go ahead and criticize the VA, saying it's a place that needs to be shut down, which it is not a place that needs to be shut down. The VA can only do what it has the resources to do with, help people with the resources that it has. I found out from one of my doctors that a good number of the VA care has been outsourced in places called community care clinics. VA doctors, by contract, can only see about 300 patients a month each. The subcontracted doctors, because it's being contracted out, can see up to 12 to 1,600 patients a month, and they don't always have to be all VA because they've been tasked out. What ends up happening is you have people who are in the VA system that are reliant on VA care who need help, either for physical ailments or mental ailments, and cannot seek that aid or that assistance because funding has been cut to their local community places, or there aren't enough doctors in their VA hospitals, or they can't get an appointment with the community care, or wherever they happen to be doesn't accept choice program or whatever's going on. And this is all an attempt to defund the VA even further, or God forbid, privatize the VA. And then the veterans that these people claim to care so much about will probably continue killing ourselves in VA parking lots of the hospitals or of the VA offices, because we have elected officials that love nothing more than to pump their chests at the idea that they've done something good for America by saying, support the troops. And all I have to say to them is they can go fuck themselves.
Well, there you go. So
I'm sorry. Long rant over. Ask your local congressman, congressperson what they're actually doing. Hold them accountable. I don't give a shit if they're a Republican or a Democrat. Hold them accountable for whatever they're doing, because there's so many people from the Vietnam era, from the World War II era, from Korea, from the Gulf War, from the war on terrorism that are not getting adequate mental and physical care because they're not able to, because of bureaucratic issues that are brought on by legislative issues and holdups. There we go.
Cool. Well, I have nothing to add to that because, that's definitely not my area. But I will say that I've very much enjoyed this conversation and hearing aspects of your life that I don't normally get to hear about. And I hear about a lot of personal stuff. So it's interesting to hear an aspect of your life that I don't normally get to see. So thank you for sharing all that.
Just wait till you start to learn who the real me is.
And next week, we're going to share an aspect of my life, because you don't know this, but I collect ghosts and keep them in my basement. And next week, we're going to look at...
I keep them in my backyard, but that's because I have a cemetery behind my house.
All right, fine. I live in Arizona. We don't have basements, whatever. But next week, we're going to look at 13 ghosts, and I'm pretty excited about that, so it should be a blast. All right, so I guess that wraps everything up. So as always, I am James Sabata.
And I'm Don Guillory.
And we'll see you next week.